So right now, United States health officials are seeing a major shortage of the swine flu vaccine, and that shortage has caused somewhat of a mini hysteria here in the United States. People are standing in long lines and sometimes overnight to get the shot. But is it all worth it? Well, some experts are saying that the vaccine is hardly a defense against a pandemic that some say could take the lives of more people than the plague and AIDS combined. Well, joining me to help talk about this is Shannon Brownlee, a senior fellow at the New America Foundation. Shannon, thanks so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
So first of all, I know that you've written that people in this situation when it comes to relying on the swine flu vaccine is comparable to people in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina. Can you explain that comparison to me?
Well, first let's make a distinction between seasonal flu and the current swine flu pandemic. And when we talked about a big pandemic, which would be the big pandemic that would be similar to 1918, which could kill many, many, many thousands of people, that's not what's happening right now. Swine flu is not that pandemic, and it's really important to remember that. So swine flu is a little bit different from the flu we get every winter. And the flu that we get every winter, we've had a policy in this country of vaccinating the elderly. And really all that our article talks about is vaccine really helping the people that we vaccinate? Are we doing our vaccination program correctly? And the reason that's important is not just for during seasonal flu every winter, but what happens when we get one of these pandemics, when we get one of these new viruses.
And so based on your research, do you think that vaccination is the appropriate measure in the swine flu situation that President Obama recently declared was a national emergency?
I think that, well, what the national emergency is all about is a slightly different issue. He's not saying that there's so many deaths that it's become a national emergency, but we can talk about that. What we say in the article is not that vaccination is a waste of time. We simply say that it's not clear exactly who benefits from vaccination and are we vaccinating the right people. So let's talk a little bit about swine flu. Swine flu seems to be not so deadly for the elderly. Most of the time during regular seasonal flu, it's old people who are most vulnerable to flu. This time around it seems to be more young adults and children and older adults about my age, about 50. So should we be vaccinating those people? Well, it may be the right thing to do, and we probably ought to be doing it, but we at the same time need to be testing to find out exactly how well vaccine works.
And obviously, you know, some of the problems with the vaccine right now is that you just can't find it anywhere. I mean, what other solutions in the future could the United States look into to better prepare for a pandemic like this?
Well, there are a couple of things that we can think about. One of the things we can think about are these non-pharmacological approaches like hand washing, like making sure you have a buddy. So if you're sick at home, somebody brings you food so that you and your family don't have to go out into a public place. Obsessive hand washing is probably a good idea for all kinds of viral things, especially during the winter. But flu vaccination may be the right thing to do, but what we need to do is think about who we vaccinate. So it might be really important to vaccinate people who work in nursing homes, people who work in hospitals, teachers. It may be really most important to vaccinate those people who can mount a good immune response and may be able to cut the transmission.
So do you think that the government handled the situation appropriately? And right now, what should the average person out there do if they're not in one of those groups that's more susceptible to the swine flu?
Well, if you're elderly, you probably don't need to worry too much about swine flu. You were probably exposed to it. You may have been exposed to it in the 1950s when we had a similar virus, and it seems like it's not so deadly. If you're in one of those vulnerable populations, which is you have children, I have a 14-year-old, the first thing to do is realize that swine flu, while easily caught, is not terribly serious for the vast majority of people. It's not a really deadly flu. Number two, getting vaccinated is probably not a bad idea.
And if you can't find the vaccine,
don't panic.
Okay.
Don't panic.
And
just make sure you wash those hands, get your kids to wash their hands, stay away from sick people.
And really quickly, do you think that the government did handle the situation appropriately or not?
It's hard to second guess, and we won't know until after everything is done.
Okay, well, Shannon, thanks so much for joining me. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for right now, but it's back to you in Moscow for now.